She was only visiting a grave, a place meant for silence, for mourning. But that day, a powerful billionaire mother found something she could never have imagined. Kneeling in the cold grass was a black waitress, Angela Brown, her tears falling as a child clung desperately to her side. Why would a stranger be crying at her son's grave? And what hidden truth connected them all? This chance encounter would unravel secrets of loss, injustice, and a painful reality society too often tries to ignore. What began as a quiet visit would soon uncover a truth capable of shaking both women's lives forever. Darius Johnson lived a life of privilege, but privilege could never protect a heart broken by loss. Her only son was gone, and the cemetery had become the one place she returned to again and again, searching for peace she never seemed to find. For her, grief was private, hidden behind closed doors, away from the public eye. For Angela Brown, life had always been a battle in the open. Working long shifts as a waitress, raising a young boy alone, she carried the weight of bills, prejudice, and the silent judgment of those who never saw her struggle. Each day was survival. Yet even in the face of hardship, she carried herself with quiet strength, teaching her child to keep faith in a world that often refused to see them. Neither woman knew the other. Their lives couldn't have been more different. One surrounded by wealth, the other scraping to get by. Yet fate had drawn them both to the same place, the same day, the same grave. As Darius laid flowers at her son's headstone, she noticed Angela nearby, her sobs raw and unrestrained. It wasn't the silent grief of someone visiting a relative. It was anguish, personal and piercing. And in that moment, Darius's curiosity turned to unease. Why would this stranger be crying at her son's grave? And what story was hidden in her tears? The billionaire stood at her son's grave, lost in her own sorrow, when she noticed the figure just a few feet away. A black woman, still in her work uniform, knelt on the damp ground. Her shoulders shook as she tried to quiet her sobs, one hand clutching the tiny arm of a child who couldn't have been more than 5 years old. At first, Darius assumed it was coincidence, just another grieving mother visiting a loved one, but then she noticed the child's eyes, wide, innocent, and filled with confusion, as if he was too young to understand why his mother's tears wouldn't stop. The scene wasn't random. There was something deeply personal about the way Angela whispered into the ground as though she was speaking directly to Darius's son. Her voice carried fragments of words. "I'm sorry. Forgive me. He didn't deserve this." Darius's heart raced. The pain in Angela's tone wasn't distant grief. It was guilt. The truth began to unfold slowly like a cruel puzzle. Angela wasn't just mourning. She was carrying a burden tied directly to this grave. And as Darius watched, shock began to shift into suspicion. She thought of how people like Angela were often treated, dismissed, ignored, invisible in the eyes of those with power. A waitress who worked until her feet ached, only to face prejudice daily from customers who refused to see her humanity. Yet here she was, crying at the grave of a billionaire's son. The contrast was jarring, impossible to ignore. Before Darius could speak, another layer of cruelty revealed itself. A cemetery groundskeeper, noticing the scene, approached with sharp disapproval. His eyes narrowed on Angela, not on Darius. His tone was harsh, dismissive, as if her presence here was out of place. Without a word, the message was clear. You don't belong here. Angela shrank under the gaze, pulling her child closer. It wasn't new. This was the weight she lived under daily. To be doubted, judged, and denied the right to even grieve openly. And Darius saw it, saw the sting of racism she herself had never endured, but which pressed down on Angela like an unshakable shadow. This wasn't coincidence. It wasn't just grief. Something deeper, darker, connected them both. The unanswered questions hung heavy in the air. Who was Angela Brown really, and what truth tied her tears to the boy buried beneath the cold earth? The story wasn't just about mourning anymore. It was building toward a truth capable of shattering everything Darius thought she knew. The silence finally broke when Darius asked the question clawing at her chest, "Why are you here?" Angela froze, her child's small hand clinging to her skirt. Her voice trembled, not with anger but with exhaustion. And then, she told the truth. Her son, the billionaire's son, had once been her only source of kindness in a world that treated her as invisible. He had spoken to her when others sneered, defended her when others mocked, and reminded her that people could be better. But Angela's connection went deeper than kindness. On the night of his death, her son had been there. He had witnessed it all. The insults, the hate, the confrontation that spiraled out of control. He had seen Darius's boy stand against cruelty, and he had seen the price of that courage. Darius's world collapsed. She had always believed her son's death was a tragic accident, but now the truth stood before her. He had been silenced because he refused to stay quiet in the face of racism. And the only witness was a woman society never listened to, a black waitress dismissed as if her voice didn't matter. The grave was no longer a symbol of personal grief. It became a monument to injustice. A young man taken too soon. A mother silenced by poverty and race. A truth buried because no one wanted to hear it. Darius felt her knees weaken. She thought she had known pain, but this was something else entirely. Her son hadn't just died, he had been stolen. And the silence around his death was as violent as the act itself. Angela's voice faded into the cold air, leaving Darius with a truth that cut deeper than any wound. The question was no longer how her son had died. It was, what would she do with this truth now? Darius stood frozen, her tears falling onto the same soil where Angela's grief had already soaked in. For the first time, wealth and privilege meant nothing. Grief no longer separated them. It united them. She realized that money, power, and status had never protected her son from hate, and they would never shield Angela or her child either. What happened at this grave was not an isolated tragedy. It was a reflection of a system that allowed racism to take lives silently until another name was etched in stone. Angela walked away still carrying her burden, but no longer invisible. Her truth had finally been acknowledged, and though nothing could bring back the young man they both mourned, the moment left a scar that demanded change. Because this wasn't just about two mothers. It was about every story ignored, every voice silenced, every life taken too soon. The question lingers for all of us. How many more lives must be buried before justice rises? How many more mothers must stand at graves before their voices are finally heard? This story doesn't end in the cemetery. It continues with us, with the way we listen, the way we speak out, the way we refuse to let racism hide in silence any longer. The grave may hold their sons, but it should never bury the truth. The question is, will we let it? If this story moved you, don't let it fade into silence. Share your thoughts in the comments because every voice matters. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit like, subscribe, and join us in shining a light on truths too often ignored.